from New Horizons back to Earth. And it's
unpromised wall. This meeting coming as the Trump administration fires back at presumptive House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's funding package, which Democrats plan to pass by tomorrow night after taking back the House majority.
Can't be reasoned with.
Democrats to open the government, address the taking over tomorrow, divided government in Washington. You might see that a lot, the House passing a bill and the Senate and the White House not signing off on it, at least over the next couple of years. Harris?
All right, Rich, thank you very much. We'll bring it out to the couch now. So I would say a couple of things about today's meeting, Richard. First of all, it's the first cabinet meeting that the president has had since October. So we're all watching to see not only the developments with regard to that, but there's some new people in the room. And many of them are acting. Yeah, yes. Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney acting at this point. You've got Pac Shanahan, who's taking over defense, as Mattis has just left. He's acting as well. And you've got Matthew Whitaker at DOJ, although he's been there since November, but he's still in acting. So there's some new players at the table.
Definitely new players at the table, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the president plays. This is the last 24 hours where the Republicans had control of the House, the Senate, and the Congress, and the House of Representatives, because tomorrow it all changes. Once Nancy Pelosi gets speaker to the gavel, the votes change, the committee chairmanships change, and it changes how this president's going to operate in Washington with somebody on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue that's plans on holding him accountable.
You know, Jillian, what I think is also interesting is Nancy Pelosi seems to be taking the lead more than Chuck Schumer, and I realize that Democrats don't have the majority in the Senate, didn't and still won't by more now, but it's an interesting dynamic with her and President Trump.
It is, and a lot of people, the last couple of days anyway, have been pointing out specifically how the president has been not as harsh, I'll say, to Nancy Pelosi as he has been with other people, especially you look at responses and things that he said on social media, on Twitter, just the way he calls people out. So I think it's evident that he wants to play nice with her, that that's going to be the best situation going forward.
Yeah. Lisa?
Well, I think President Trump has more leverage when you don't separate DHS funding from the rest of the agencies that need funding. This is specifically why Nancy Pelosi is offering this deal to do it in two parts, to have DHS funding in one part and then fund the rest of the agencies that need funding in a separate bill. This is why Republicans should say no to this deal, and Senate Republicans and President Trump should not play ball with this. They should keep it as one overall funding bill as opposed to separating the agencies. Also, President Trump needs to figure out, do you want to have Nancy Pelosi and Democrats in the House hold the Senate Republicans and the White House captive for the next 2 years, or do you want to set the precedent that they're not going to just lay down to Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat-controlled House? I also find it interesting that Nancy Pelosi says that the wall is immoral and ineffective, yet she offers any funding for a border fence. Clearly, she doesn't think that's the case.
She said some pretty offensive things, too. I mean, calling out his manhood. I'm not making it up. That actually came out of her mouth.
These are the same Democrats who get very upset with the language that President Trump uses, but it gives them cover to speak in similar ways. I'll add that. But we saw, Rich Edson read that tweet from President Trump earlier today. Mexico is paying for the wall through the new trade deal. I want to know why in the name of Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy are you talking about Mexico is paying for it? Well, then why did you shut the government down then? In terms of the political messaging, this makes zero sense to me. Maybe, but President Trump is very politically savvy. And after President George H.W. Bush's death, the Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial about Bush's missteps and his achievements. And Bush wrote in his diary in April of 1989, "I cannot break my read the lips pledge. I would be totally destroyed if I did." He broke it in a very one-sided agreement with the Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell at the time. Yeah. He gave in on tax increases, and he did not get the spending cuts and entitlement reform that was promised to him. And so he maybe knows that.
But in fairness, President Trump has made gains with Mexico in regards to immigration, particularly on having asylum seekers stay in Mexico while they wait for their asylum cases to move forward the process here in the United States. Because the big problem we've seen is that first initial test is so easy to pass that 89% will pass that first initial test trying to seek asylum with a credible fear threshold, but then only 9% will actually be granted asylum when they show up to their immigration court cases. A lot of them go missing in the process, so that's why that's so important. So he has seen gains there.
So what Lisa's bringing up is something that Democrats and Republicans seem to disconnect on, and I don't really understand it, because either a person is found or a person is lost. Like, You can't be both.
Right.
So if the number is as low as 9% actually successfully going through the process, when you know you had many more, but you also know that they're roaming the country, I don't think it's too hard to do the math on they're roaming the country illegally and they potentially are not leaving. I want to get this in if we can, because we just got an excited note from inside the White House. We are in the cabinet room. That is Pool. That is the Pool crew. They're really excited to be there. It's the first of 2019. And it's our own Kevin Corke. And he says that the president says, quote, "We feel like we can get a lot done with Democrats." And he's sending me now the play-by-play. So this is going to continue to get exciting. Oh, look, we have a little picture. Hey, Jay, can we put that picture up? That Jay is our executive producer.
He's
okay.
Awesome.
He's working on that.
Yeah, sure.
The president says our southern border is like a sieve. We need a wall. These are Kevin's notes that are coming from the Pool right now. So as we get more, you know what that is, leaking like a sieve?
Of course. I
And he spelled it correctly. It's an A.
I mean, herein lies a problem with the border wall. Here's the facts is that the majority of folks who come to the country illegal are visa overstays. So we could build an 80-foot wall. If we don't deal with visa overstays, if we don't modernize our immigration system, you will still have illegal folks coming into this country.
Can't you do both?
Right.
You can, and Democrats have proposed just that over the summer, and the White House did not weigh in. We put $25 billion on the table for border control, for border security. On top of that, we said we also need some other fixes. We need to deal with the DACA population. We need to deal with the temporary status population. We need to modernize.
Think the president wants to do that? That's who started this conversation.
We put it on
That's
the floor.
That's what the party started.
We put it on the floor in the summer, and the president said nothing. He did nothing about it. It just sat there.
Was there money for the wall?
Yes, there was $25 billion for border security in that bill.
Yeah, but you're not being specific about
the president's not being specific either. First he said the wall, now he says slats, now he says border security.
But it's always been, he had the contest.
He said Mexico would pay for it, and we're still waiting on the check.
Were always one of the options.
What are you saying, as Senator Lindsey Graham suggested, President Trump here's a compromise, which the Wall Street Journal editorial board writes about today. $5 billion for border security, including wall funding, and then work permits to keep dreamers here in this country legally. Because it would benefit not just President Trump, because it would be an out from this shutdown, kind of an off-ramp, but it would also benefit the Democrats, because this whole dreamer issue of what President Obama did is in front of the courts right now, and on the merits, President Trump might win in terms of rescinding the protections for dreamers. So wouldn't it benefit the Democrats if they could get on board with that? And will they do it?
I think it would benefit the Democrats. Herein lies a problem. I think every time we've tried to go to the White House and negotiate with them. So the president says he's in the White House busily negotiating. But if you talk to Speaker Pelosi, or to be Speaker, Speaker-elect Pelosi, she would say she hasn't heard from the president since December 11th at their last meeting. He's not calling folks in. He's not having this is the first conversation we're having since the government shutdown about how we bring the government back together with Democrats in the room. Democrats now control one chamber in the United States Congress. That means he has to work with them. And Lisa is right at the beginning of the segment by saying that the president had leverage.
Thank you, Richard.
In leverage by keeping
the way you say that. That's
very nice.
A quick question, though, because the chamber that Democrats control is not the one, though, that will make the decision that needs a 60-vote threshold. That's the Senate. So are there enough... because I don't care which one you serve, and you probably have friends in both, right? Of
course.
So bicameral friendship. Are there enough Democrats that could possibly sway a few Democrats in the Senate, from the House to the Senate, to try to get them to join? The president will need 10.
Just for a singular $55 billion wall vote. I don't think the president has the votes for that.
You don't even think he has that?
No.
And that's what Pelosi
If he had the
said.
votes, he would open the government already.
Well, and I want Lisa to give me the last word on that.
Well, you need 7 now, because Republicans have a 53-seat majority in this next Congress. I don't know what it's going to take to get there. Honestly, I don't really see the middle right now, which I think is the problem. I see Nancy Pelosi and Democrats wanting to not play ball. President Trump doesn't want to accept anything that doesn't have at least a down payment on the wall, which would be something like $5 billion.
Well, and
so this is going to go on until people start feeling more pain, and then they put pressure on Congress.
But I thought the down payment was coming from Mexico.
But the Republican leadership is not putting up anything for a vote, even in the Senate, even though a similar bill passed to keep the government open through February, the 8th, on the Department of Homeland Security funding. They voted in favor of that in the Senate, but they're not going to put it up again if President Trump, if there's any inkling, he'll veto it.
Yeah.
It's not.
And I continue to ask the question: when the president had the votes and the majority in both, why didn't Republicans help him get this done?
That's a good question.
That is so unpopular at holiday parties sometimes.
The sanctuary city
Sounds like a recent experience.
I would love to have a holiday party with you, and we can talk about this.
Let's talk. All right, so we're
Sounds
getting
like
those
fun to me.
notes because pool today inside the White House in this cabinet meeting, the first since October for the President of the United States, is our own Kevin Corke with Fox News Channel, and he is emailing us from there and says the President says our southern border is like a sieve, which means it is porous. We need a wall, and so we'll continue the conversation as soon as we get the video from inside that meeting. We'll bring it to you and roll it here live. Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren set to hit the campaign trail as the President responds to her potential run for the White House if she's the Democrat nominee. And a renewed debate over whether there is a gender double and Mitt Romney trading jabs on the eve of Romney taking his Senate seat. What's behind their new feud and what this could mean for the GOP as key Republicans stand by the President?
What Tennesseans are looking at is a president who has delivered on turning the economy around, promise kept.